everyone. Welcome to our breakout session. We're just letting everyone in from the waiting room. So if you could have a little bit of patience with us while people connect in. We're going to start this Zoom meeting requesting that everyone is on mute so that our excellent presenters today can give their presentation. But if you've attended any of the other breakout sessions this week, the goal is to be a little bit more interactive, connect with each other a little bit more than our plenary sessions do. So we will ask you, eventually to add your questions, maybe turn on your video, maybe audio if you're so bold to ask your question in person. But for now, we'll start with everyone on mute. And we'll get started maybe a minute or two after the hour to make sure people can reconnect after lunch and are into our Zoom room. But again, welcome. This is the 2 p.m. breakout session, and we'll get started in just a minute. My name is Megan Walters. I work for the World Food Prize Foundation on the Iowa Hunger Summit. So thanks for your patience and thanks for rejoining us for this final breakout session. And again, we've had some more people enter the waiting room, so I'm going to repeat my little spiel. My name is Megan Walters. I work for the World Food Prize Foundation. Welcome to our 2 p.m. breakout session, Opportunity Gaps, Nutrition Programs, and COVID-19, Lessons Learned from Kids in the Kitchen. We'll get started in just another minute here. I'm seeing a few people in the waiting room. But if this is the first breakout session you've attended, welcome. We're excited to have you. If you've been to our previous breakout sessions, you kind of know how these will run. We'll ask that you start muted, and then later on, as we get into some Q&A, we'd love to hear from you. Have this be a chance to connect a little bit more in a virtual world. If you have any problems along the way, any tech issues, any questions for our presenters, feel free to throw them in the chat. We also want to make sure that you all have a chance to connect with each other. Since we can't be in person, networking is a little bit harder, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, maybe where you're coming from, or what you're looking forward to hearing in our presentation today. All right, it seems like we've gotten most people in from the waiting room, so I'm going to give the spiel for the third and final time. My name is Megan Walters. I work for the World Food Prize Foundation. This is the 2 p.m. breakout session at the Iowa Hunger Summit titled Opportunity Gaps, Nutrition Programs, and COVID-19, Lessons Learned from Kids in the Kitchen. I'd like to introduce our incredible speakers today. With us, we have Demi Johnson, the Youth Nutrition Coordinator at Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, Polk County. Demi serves as a youth nutrition educator in Polk County, Iowa. She primarily coordinates and teaches the program Kids in the Kitchen to youth in kindergarten through 5th grade in Central Iowa. Demi graduated from the University of Northern Iowa with a master's degree in community health education and a bachelor's degree in psychology. Also with us is Sarah Tanis. Sarah is the Youth Nutrition and 4-H Outreach Coordinator at Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, Black Hawk County. Sarah works as a in Black Hawk County. Her main project in the youth nutrition role is teaching the research-based Iowa State University Kids in the Kitchen program to kindergarten through 5th grade youth. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Sarah has had to adjust, get creative, and change how to serve youth as the typical after-school programming was not an option. She graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Stout with a bachelor's degree in service management and 2 minors in business administration and human development and family studies. She went on to get her master's degree in professional leadership at North Central College. Sarah has worked in higher education in residence life and student life and worked in and with nonprofit organizations. She has a passion for programming and giving youth opportunities to try new things and step outside of their own element. So with that, I'm excited to welcome both Sarah and Demi. Thank you for joining us today. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Megan. All right. So my name is Demi Johnson. Thank you again for having us and for joining us this afternoon. I guess one quick question I have, can you all see the waiting room admits on my screen?
No, we cannot, Demi.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Megan introduced us, and mostly today we just want to share the lessons that we've learned while getting our education. For example, I'll pull a lot of the research that I learned during my time in the Cedar Valley and share with you how I've applied it down here in the Des Moines Metro.
Is this Nancy? Your name popped
Sarah
up.
was the new educator who is joining us today. She's newer to Extension, and we're so happy to have her. She was a key player in helping us create our virtual learning documents once the pandemic made us rethink how we offer our program.
And Megan did a great job of introducing us. So everything that's on here, you can already, I've already heard, but I started with Extension this past January. But I also worked in Wisconsin Extension and Outreach previous to this with the 4-H program. And currently in the role, I work with the kindergarten through 5th grade youth and the kids in the kitchen, which is what we are here to talk to you guys all about today. So we're very excited to have you. Thanks for joining us for this afternoon session and for participating in the Iowa Hunger Summit. With that, we are going to discuss opportunity gaps, explain more about our nutrition education program, Kids in the Kitchen, and our programming response to COVID-19, in which we are continuing to trying to work through challenges of closing the opportunity gap and just some of the challenges that have come along with a global pandemic. To begin this discussion, we are going to take a look at some of the kids who have participated in our nutrition program through 3 stories that Demi is going to share.
All right, so we're excited to tell you the stories of these 3 children that I have worked with in the Des Moines Metro during this nutrition program. I do want to make it really clear, I've changed their names and some of the details to help maintain their privacy, but the stories are true and they're based off of what I've learned from the stories that the kids have told me in our time together, mostly prior to the pandemic. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Kaylee. Kaylee is a 5th grader from a suburb of Des Moines. I met her during one of our Babysitting Basics programs that we offer through Extension and Outreach, and we were excited to see each other again on her first night of Kids in the Kitchen through her community education program. Kaylee was a mature, kind, and a natural leader in her classroom. Kaylee's class was in one of 2 brightly lit family and consumer science rooms in the high school. She often helped clean up the extra space in the room because high schoolers are messy. And she attended all of the lessons except one, which was our last. She knew weeks in advance that she wouldn't be able to attend because they were leaving for a family vacation. She asked me what she could do to make up the lesson and sincerely seemed sad that she was going to miss it. Her mother also reached out via email to see what Kaylee and her brother could do to make up the lesson and to let me know that they would be gone that week. You can also meet Ryder. Ryder is a 5th grader from a rural community just outside of the Des Moines Metro. His mom is a librarian who helped me set up his Kids in the Kitchen class that was offered in their colorful school library that also served as their community library for their small town. He was confident and silly and would occasionally protest the class by keeping a bottle of pop on his desk during the nutrition portion of our program. He and the other students and their parents in the class shared an excitement for an outside of school program as there were few options for them being so far away from the city. They shared stories about their farm chores and often checked out books and DVDs. I learned because video streaming didn't work well in their community that had such limited access to internet reception. And meet Destiny. Destiny is a 5th grader in downtown Des Moines. She walks to her school, which is an older building that was not even originally built to be a school. Destiny's Kids in the Kitchen class was in a room not much larger than a closet, and it had mismatched furniture and no windows. Destiny is a kind and shy girl who opened up slowly to me, but quickly showed her maturity and leadership when working with her friends. After one of our lessons, there was an extra bag of a cereal trail mix, the recipe that the students had made that day. Destiny held back and quietly asked what I was going to do with the leftovers. She shyly shared that she didn't have much food at home and asked if she could take the leftovers home for her sister.
So throughout the session today, we will refer back to those 3 youth in the stories that Demi just shared by name to represent the overall opportunities and situations that many youth in our programs have. We hope that when Demi presented those, you remember the name of the youth characteristics of their situation and created a visual representation in your mind of the situation each youth was born into. So now we're going to take a moment to define what an opportunity gap is. Opportunity gap refers to the fact that the arbitrary circumstances in which people are born, such as their race, ethnicity, zip code, and socioeconomic status, determine their opportunities in life, rather than all people having the chance to achieve the best of their own potential. So opportunity gap becomes particularly important when we are working with young people because as educators, we need to be aware that not all youth are coming from the same situation, and that the situation they are coming from is not something that they have any control over. That was seen through Demi's stories that she shared of Kaylee, Ryder, and Destiny. When we plan our programming, review the curriculum that we are using, and then when we are teaching our program, we need to acknowledge that this gap exists and actively figure out ways to narrow that opportunity gap in things that we can control. So in all three of those stories, those kids had a community member who had worked diligently with an organization like ours to help set up a nutrition class. This helps provide opportunities to the children in that area. In each of their stories, you'll see that everyone did the best with what they had, even though each group had a different set of challenges and opportunities. The opportunity gaps varied for each youth, and each program had its own challenges. All of the programs for each of these youth would soon be disrupted by COVID-19, causing other challenges, concerns, and opportunities, along with still trying to address the opportunity gap. On this slide here, you can see, this is from Dr. Robert D. Putnam. It is a quote from his book that Demi is going to talk about in a minute. And it is, "The gap between haves and have-nots was economic." And this is referring to historically in the United States. "Now it is social too, and a new apartheid stalks America."
All right, so the book that we are referring to in this is called Our Kids. I think I mentioned earlier, it was published in 2016, written by Robert D. Putnam, and it was one that I used during one of my classes during my master's program at UNI. And the reason I wanted to pull from this was because in my day-to-day job, I am not a direct researcher. It's something that I've learned to do, but don't typically do every day. And I think that's the way a lot of you, hopefully, who are on this presentation with us today are also a lot of community members, and we're actively trying to take in new information while applying it to what we do day to day. So I can't necessarily speak to specifics on data collection and analysis, but I do see a direct correlation between what I learned while reading that and while studying that book and what I do in day-to-day work through Kids in the Kitchen. And on that, we can talk about what that day-to-day work looks like. Okay, so first and foremost, the picture that you see on this slide is pre-pandemic. We wear masks now, and we actually don't work with kids anymore. So if you are initially alarmed by that, please don't be. This isn't what it looks like. But our program is called Kids in the Kitchen. And while Kids in the Kitchen is a popular name for youth cooking programs, the Kids in the Kitchen that we are referring to is a grant-funded program offered through Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, specifically in Black Hawk and Polk counties. Kids in the Kitchen is a youth program that primarily serves youth from low-resource families to improve diet quality, food resource management, food safety, and food security, while building skills and self-equity in these areas through a 7-week hands-on age-appropriate cooking class. The program is funded by a grant from the Expanded Food and Nutrition Program. We call it FNAP. Since 1969, FNAP has partnered with land-grant universities like Extension in all 50 states to address critical societal concerns by employing paraprofessional staff and influencing nutrition and physical activity behaviors of low-resource families, particularly those with young children. In our program, low resource families are those whose annual income is less than 185% of the federal poverty guidelines. In Iowa, that represents a family of 4 whose annual income is at or below $48,470. When we choose the community partners and the students that we work with for Kids in the Kitchen, we aim to have at least half of the class qualify for free and reduced lunches. Because we work with youth, we don't necessarily ask for their family income directly. Often we get this information from the Iowa Department of Education's website based on each site's school district. However, in some instances, I know that our partners serve youth from low resource families and that the school district poverty data does not reflect the income of the group that I'm working with. Specifically, that would be like the Kaylee's groups and Riders groups. In the year that I worked with Kaylee, 33.9% of the students in her school qualified for free and reduced to lunch, which is similar to the 32.8% of students from Riders' rural school district. Both are astonishingly different from the reality that Destiny and her classmates face in the Des Moines school system. The Des Moines Independent School System's data states that during the 2019-2020 academic year, 77.8% of the enrolled students qualified for free and reduced lunch rates. And while these students live only a few miles apart from each other, much closer than those of the students who make up the rural community districts farther away from the metro, they live very different lives and have astonishingly different opportunities based on which neighborhoods they call home.
And in Black Hawk County, I primarily teach our Kids in the Kitchen program to students in the Waterloo School District. Through utilizing the Educate Iowa website, we find our information on the free or reduced lunch rates of schools in our counties as another way to reach those underserved populations. For Black Hawk County, there are 11 schools in Cedar Falls, one of which falls into the 40% or higher free and reduced lunch rate category, and then one other that is at 38%, a school that's watched and monitored for future changes as it's close to the bubble. Otherwise, all of Cedar Falls elementary schools are under 24%. Then, when we look at the 18 schools in Waterloo, all 18 of those schools fall above the 40%. There's a drastic difference between these two cities alone in our county. And I've referred to Waterloo and Cedar Falls a lot, and I will throughout this presentation because that's a large population in our county. However, when we look at other cities in our county, in Black Hawk here, they do not, none of them fall in the 40% or higher category. So that is why my primary focus for Kids in the Kitchen takes place in Waterloo.
All right. The environmental factors that create an unfair disadvantage for some individuals while helping others are referred to as opportunity gaps by education professionals, social determinants of health by health professionals, and they stem from years of unjust policies that we now refer to as systemic racism. Historically, redlined neighborhoods are still economically disadvantaged and continue to house people from underrepresented race and ethnic backgrounds. These areas in Iowa continue to suffer from economic, educational, and health-related disadvantages. All right, so now I'm going to try to read all of this, which I got from our book. Bear with me, this is why they say don't put a lot of writing on a slide. So in the quarter century between 1979 and 2005, average after-tax income, adjusted for inflation, grew by $900 a year for the bottom fifth of American households. It grew by $8,700 a year for the middle fifth, and by $745,000 a year for the top 1% of American households. Stressful conditions from outside school are much more likely to intrude into the classroom in high poverty schools. Every 1 of 10 stressors is 2 to 3 times more common in high poverty schools. These include student hunger, unstable housing, lack of medical and dental care, caring for family members, immigration issues, community violence, and safety issues. In the chat box, those of you who work with youth in your communities, are any of your youth affected by any of those issues?
I would also say we made sure to type all of this large quote out on this slide because these numbers are drastically different, and seeing them versus just hearing them For some people like me who are visual is really impactful. It's more impactful. So looking at that difference of that bottom percent versus that top 1%, that's under 1,000. We have 900 and then it's 745,000. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, and Amy chatted in the back. She said, yes, she's definitely seen these issues affect the children and families that she knows. And so does Mandy. So thank you both for participating with us. All right, so we threw a lot of pretty heavy numbers at you, and we've talked about opportunity gaps. We're gonna take a deep breath here and let it out, because now we're gonna try to share some positive news about some of the successes we've had in Kids in the Kitchen. And just keeping all of this in the back of our mind, because it's really important in the work that we do and how we choose our site partners. But now we get to tell you a little bit about just some of the successes that we've had. So far, I'd say in a more typical non-pandemic year, we've done fairly well. In fiscal year 2019 in Polk County, we served 900 kindergarten and 5th grade youth. And this is myself and my colleague Cassie, who I believe is on this call. 45% of those youth identified with underserved race and ethnic populations. Of the youth in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, 68% showed improved nutrition choices based on pre and post survey results. And in the students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, 89% of the students showed improved nutrition choices based on pre and post survey results.
And every year we put together impact statements of how our programming affects the youth we serve. This ensures that we're meeting our goals for the program and that the curriculum that we are utilizing is working for its intended purpose. This also allows us to update our curriculum, recipes, and activities in the Kids in the Kitchen program for the next programming year. This allows us to see if there's areas we need to be stronger in or could be stronger or should be emphasizing more. So here on this slide, this is Blackhawk County's information from fiscal year 2019. We served 456 kindergarten through 5th grade youth. We have 1 Kids in the Kitchen educator. This data was before me, so it was through our lovely Kids in the Kitchen educator, Emily, who got this information. You can also see that well, not on this slide, but 37% of those youth identified that we served with underserved race and ethnic populations. Of the youth in kindergarten through 2nd grade, 80% showed improved nutrition choices based on our pre and post survey results. Furthermore, students in 3rd through 5th grade, 89% showed improved nutrition choices based on those survey results. You can also see the high 95 and 98% of those students improved on 1 or more choices on their post-survey results. Those choices include nutrition, food safety, and physical activity choices. Because when we teach the Kids in the Kitchen program, we want to be all-inclusive of nutrition, food, and also getting that physical activity and movement through our youth.
We shared that our primary focus for our program was to serve Des Moines, Metro, and Waterloo residents, but there are still community members outside of those areas who qualify for and benefit from our services, such as Kaylee and her classmates in the suburban areas of Des Moines, and Ryder and his in the more rural areas. In addition to expanding the program, we recently revamped it to become more inclusive to the students we serve. We taught the program and we soon learned that some of our recipes needed to be more inclusive for kids with dietary restrictions. For example, our first lesson included recipes that all required dairy or use of a non-dairy alternative. And we adapted our lessons to use a recipe that didn't require dairy to ensure that no student had to feel left out of the first lesson until we could learn more about each participant's needs and adapt the remaining lessons for that group. Furthermore, all of our materials are offered in English and Spanish to serve our Spanish-speaking youth that we work with. And additionally, the recipes that we use are all on a website called Spend Smart, Eat Smart, which can be translated virtually to most languages. Here I have a slide that shows community mapping. So one of the tools that we use also to make sure that we are reaching a wide variety of students is to use community mapping to visually see where we are reaching. So you can see in the center, primarily most of our students in Polk County are in the Des Moines Metro. And then we are able to kind of expand that out. I highly recommend community mapping for anyone that is looking to expand their program or to really reflect on how you're reaching youth, because you can visually see where you are serving your participants and if there are any areas of need. These things can be overlapped with bus routes or school locations, churches, food pantries. You can also check if the locations are accessible for people without a vehicle. Like us, we work with all students and most of them can't drive. So are they able to ride their bikes or their Razor scooters there? Also checking if there's safety means along where you're holding your programs. So is there sidewalks and are there street lights if the class is in the evening or while it's dark?
And on the Black Hawk County map, you can visually see the Kids in the Kitchen program takes place around Waterloo and then also Evansdale. It is kind of a tiny map and a lot of these locations cover up the city titles, but you can see that primarily they are in those areas. Through this geographic mapping, it also allows us to see where, obviously where our programming is located, but also its proximity to higher populations and partnering organizations that we have. For instance, programming in Waterloo and Evansdale make a lot of sense when we look at Black Hawk County's population. In the 2020 PerGrow Cedar Valley report, there's just over 132,000 people in the Cedar Valley area, of which Waterloo alone houses 71,600 of those individuals. And then Cedar Falls, it comes in next at 42,000. And then Evansdale is the third largest with just over 8,000. So also our programming focus, when we can lay out the maps like this, allows us to see population proximity and things like that. Our partnering organizations too, we partner a lot with Boys and Girls Clubs here in Waterloo area and also our YMCA, YWCA program. And those are primarily located in the Waterloo area and also Evansdale. So you can see that our programming for Kids in the Kitchen also reflects where our partners have locations for us to do our programming.
Which brings us to how we have to respond to COVID-19. So we shared with you kind of what it looked like pre-pandemic, but the global pandemic obviously changed education inside and outside of the classroom. Because of that, those partners that we relied so heavily on often weren't able to work with their students the same way, and therefore we weren't able to either. And so we all had to adjust to a virtual style of teaching, and that looked very differently in each month. Basically since March. And we had to try to find new alternative programs with current and new community partners. And we had to ask ourselves, does this still meet our grant requirements? And are we still doing our job as it was written? And are we still helping benefit our community partners? But before we get into what we want to do, we want to ask you, what have been your main challenges in serving the community or reducing opportunity gaps this year? And if you want to throw this in the chat, you can, or you can unmute yourself and just chit chat with us for a minute.
And we do have some comments that have been going in the chat, whether you can see them or not, that is all right. I'll talk a little bit about them while some of you write in some answers for challenges that you've had. We've been talking about, we've gotten some feedback about the translation is really important to accessibility. So thank you for that, Amy. We agree. We're hoping to expand some of that. In Waterloo area, we work with Embark for 4-H a lot for translations. And right now the health department does with the pandemic as well. So hoping to expand those resources to touch even more youth and families. I do see that Christine, you commented. Oh, we got lots of comments coming in about challenges, technology being a huge barrier, access to internet, access to computers, hardware, bandwidth. Some people have limited internet or phone, can only use their phone for virtual classes. getting buy-in from the school district partners with additional strains on classroom teachers and staff right now. We're going to talk a lot about that too when we talk about the changes we made during the pandemic. Lack of utilities, especially after natural disasters like Iowa had with the derecho. Thank you, Amy, for bringing that up. With even more basic utilities like electricity and water for concerns there, especially the derecho during a pandemic. Trying to get people to participate in programming virtually can be a challenge. Yes, thank you, Anne. Not being able to travel abroad, offer, oh, that's awesome, Joanna, offer gardening and nutrition programs in Guatemala. So a challenge being not able to travel to offer those programs. Being able to connect with folks in schools due to planning limits and volunteer interactions being limited. Yes, those are awesome. Thank you for all that feedback and that discussion. Mandy, not being able to cook together in the Buy Eat Live Healthy program. A lot of these things that you all just typed in the chat for challenges are things that we've also faced in similar ways as well. So we'll kind of go into our response with our Kids in the Kitchen programming to COVID-19.
Yeah, so most of you typed them, and I feel like our slide matches really similarly to what you were saying. We also had a lot of changing restrictions and safety policies. Our population was a lot harder to reach. Uncharted territory for programming virtually and not really knowing what resources the families that we serve had and how accessible that was to them. And again, you know, we've really shared how much we rely on our amazing partners and how incredibly valuable they are to us. And they were struggling with the same things, just trying to do their own work. And so it was sometimes hard to continue to build that partnership while they were just trying to get their feet on the ground. So our very first response that we somewhat created and was a Kids in the Kitchen at Home bingo card. This is something that Sarah dreamed up because she is really brilliant that way. And this helped us provide resources for families to utilize at home for food and nutrition education. It included interactive games, worksheets, videos, do-it-yourself activities, and recipes. And these were, a lot of our lessons were shortened from our Kids in the Kitchen programming. And this was available on a website and by sharing the bingo card as a hard copy with some of our partners, like our libraries, who were still able to do pickup. One of the things that we're proud of with the bingo card as our very first response was that we tried to make it as accessible as possible. So we primarily have 5 main lessons. It's technically 7, but it can be combined into 5. And with this bingo card, there are 25 different activities and arranged in a way where a student would have to go through 5 different lessons in order to get a bingo. The only way we couldn't figure out how to make it work is if they went across here, which is our kitchen safety part. And so we thought, you know, if they're going to have 5 kitchen safety lessons, that one's the most diverse and maybe immediately applicable to what they're doing at home. This card also is set up in a way that it is accessible with e-readers for students who are visually impaired. And we tried to include a lot of different learning styles. So like I shared in the last slide, we have worksheets and videos and recipes and computer games to try to cover a lot of different students' learning styles and interests. And then technology access, like we all said, that access to technology was an issue and a barrier with everything early COVID. And so we tried to create a lot of ways that this could be used by students who don't necessarily have access to a computer. And one example of that was with one of the local libraries that I work with and our mobile food pantry in Polk City. I tried to print out several of the cards as well as 5 of the worksheets. That way a student who didn't necessarily have access to a computer still had an ability to get a bingo and to go through all of the 5 lessons. So with all of our programs, we're going to share some successes and some challenges because we're proud of our ability to try to pivot quickly, but we also know that none of our solutions were absolutely perfect. And, you know, we just want to be honest and a little vulnerable here and kind of sharing some of the things we learned. So we are proud of the success for this program because we could use it long term. And we're still sharing our key ideas within this program. It reaches a larger audience, so this is something that we can share with some of our program partners who don't qualify for our traditional Kids in the Kitchen class once we're able to return to a more typical year, but they can still use some of these resources to share with their students. And it helps us build an online presence. However, there are some challenges. So we are grant funded, like I shared earlier. And with this, it was really challenging to have some impact data collection. We don't really know how successful this program is or if students learned from it because there was no way to track that. It's also still very virtually heavy, despite trying as hard as we could and doing as much as we could to make it accessible. At the end of the day, it still requires a lot of virtual work. And then we used external resources. Since this was our very first pivot, we relied on things like the MyPlate guideline websites and a few other FNEP approved websites and educational resources to come up with some of our activities and to have those ready to be rolled out right away early this summer. And so we are still relying on those sources to still be accurate and available over time, and that's something that we will now need to maintain. Okay, a little bit later this fall in Polk County, we were also able to offer a few virtual classes. So my colleague Cassie and I are piloting virtual classes with our Des Moines Metro partners, and this has been, I would say, fairly successful. We just wrapped up our first official program last week. And this helped because we were able to get some of our impact data. So the students were able to do pre and post surveys like normal, and we were able to go through all of our lessons as if we were really there, only we were over a virtual platform. We were still able to do some hands-on activities. So you can see in the picture there, I am teaching the students how to learn how to safely cut up a potato. So all of the kids were still able to use cutting boards, knives, and do some of the hands-on activities that we would traditionally do just without the actual recipe making. And then we could better reach our target audience. And so like we've been saying this whole meeting, it's really important for us to be able to work with the Des Moines Metro schools and our Waterloo residents. And this was a great way to make sure that we are offering our program to the max of our ability within those locations. But like everything virtual, it still had some challenges. So classroom management over a screen was really hard. And I had to rely really heavily on our site partner to handle that for me. Technology is always a barrier. Our sites, we were able to be pulled up on a larger screen, and the students didn't have individual screens in front of them. But every once in a while, one of us would lull a little or audio wasn't perfect. And so together we navigated the goofiness of being paused in unfortunate facial expressions and whatnot during some of our lessons. No food or recipe food. So we weren't able to bring in our recipes like normal and teach the kids how to make them. Instead, we would provide a prepackaged snack that matched the nutritional education portion of our program. And then instead of building a recipe like they normally would, they would just do one small thing like cut a potato, and no one wants to eat a raw potato. So it just got thrown away. And then we had to have a heavy reliance on our partner. Like I said, we are so blessed with great partners in Polk County, and they were able to organize all the students, help us implement all of our activities, make sure that our data was coming back with attendance, and take care of the classroom management and behavioral management that we typically see with this program. And we couldn't build our individual connections with the youth. It was really challenging over the screen because I couldn't always hear them. And so again, coming back to opportunity gaps, one special thing about Kids in the Kitchen is normally getting to learn about each of the kids that we're working with and to give them one more supportive adult in their life. And since it was virtual, we just didn't really have that option. Overall, I would say virtual classes were fairly successful, and we learned a lot from them. So I was really excited that we were able to do this pilot program.
And I think another thing to mention, I got to watch Demi and Cassie teach one of the lessons. And one of the things too is partners have different technology that they use. So when they were teaching, it was just them on a laptop, which limits the visibility for all kids in the room without even them having their own issues for visual concerns. So I think those opportunity gaps too are very evident in just the structural setup of some of our programming situations that we have. All right, so I'm going to talk about two other things that we are trying to do and adjust during pandemic with Kids in the Kitchen. So one of those are to-go kits. We continue to look at a variety of options for programming. And in my dual role as youth nutrition coordinator and 4-H outreach coordinator, I was able to utilize some of my successes and struggles with our 4-H program over the summer here in Black Hawk County to get some of this information and experiences that 4-H had. So one of those programs that we did with 4-H over the summer was a STEM library program with a couple different libraries. And we had a virtual element to it where I would pop on a Zoom and teach them a lesson. And then they would pick up a kit at one of our local libraries so they could do the kit with the materials alongside us. I had 2 families consistently participate virtually, but our library partner, who was wonderful, put the kits together and she gave out over 1,000 kits. So I had 2 families participate in person, virtually in person, but then she gave out over 1,000 kits. So one of the things that this really showed us and demonstrated is that there is a strong need in our community for having hands-on activities and an escape from the virtual screen and being on the screen. And this was during the summer too, so it wasn't even when they're getting some screen time for school with all of those adjustments. So the Kids in the Kitchen to-go kits were an option that I've partnered with our Hawkins Memorial Library in LaPorte City to do. It's all of the activities are research-based food and nutrition activities. There's a visual connection in all of the marketing and pamphlets that we have done to that original 4-H bingo card. So that is on there as well in our marketing. And all of these kits have a picture of what it is. This is probably really small on your screen, but there's a image. This particular activity kit is called Mindful Tasting, and it is our food group lesson. So you can picture, there's a picture there of my plate, and then in the top side of that, it says included supplies that come in the kit, and then there's additional supplies that families will need to have at home. And my partner, Jolene, at the library there is fantastic and had similar concerns to myself of the additional supplies, making sure that they're really accessible supplies that all families have. So a lot of those additional supplies, like in this activity, you can see one of them is napkins or a plate, which actually is not needed to do the activity, but it's just having something to set food on. So we tried really hard to be conscious of that, to be more inclusive in our programming. And then there is a large part of these activities that is a background that explains the importance of the activity. And in this case talks about food groups, but it delves into more detail about the education that we would like them to gain from this. And then on the back of the sheet, It's just a one-side printed sheet that they pick up with the kit. The back goes over the activity, how to do it. Then there's some reflection questions, because the 4-H mind in me always has reflection for youth and families to really get that engagement. And then all of our resources, including that 4-H bingo card, our Learning More, and my contact information is all on the right side. So all of these kits, there's 7 created in total. The activities include bean in a bottle, building a potato maze, bread in a bag, a colorful milk experiment, glowing germs, mindful tasting, and then sweet savory butter. A lot of these activities also are implicated in different areas in our programming. So glowing germs is mimicked after our first lesson in our actual in-person 7-lesson series. And then the colorful milk experiment is one we did virtually with the virtual lessons and is on the bingo card. So we're really trying to connect and be purposeful about all of this programming that we're doing together. So if they want to do that bingo card, they can also get those supplies through this kit if they don't have them at home. So like Demi's already talked about, we've had a lot of successes and challenges with these different activities. Successes of the kits include hands-on activities and having that emphasis. Created some new partner connections. This library is not one that I've partnered with for Kids in the Kitchen before, so that was exciting. We have possible future use as well, and continued learning at home and really fostering that with our lessons that we've been doing, our 7-lesson series in person. We always give a recipe card to send home with the parents on that lesson topic for the day, with 2 to 3 recipes on it that they can do at home. So this is just another way to help foster that continued learning at home that we want to emphasize. Challenges include the impact data collection is hard because I can't see I can't guarantee that they're going to come back to pick up another kit and hear about how the first one went, what they learned, anything like that. I am working with Jolene to make sure that when families pick up a kit, I can at least get the information of who's picking up the kit so I can know what populations are being served, but it's a very minimal amount of data that's being collected, and it's not that impact data that we're used to collecting. Also, supply funding can be a challenge. This library is wonderful, and she's providing all the supplies for these kits, which is really great. So that's worked out well for us, but in other cases, that's not always going to be what it is. There's a heavy reliance on our partner, and then distribution of kits can be a challenge depending on how the program is set up. And then lastly, also, thank you. I see a couple comments in the chat about love this, the ideas. Thank you. If you want more information, feel free to email me. Love to talk about it. But lastly, we are going to touch base on our Kids in the Kitchen social media. This actually spawned out of an in-person connection that I had with a partner that was supposed to be scheduled for summer lessons at 3 different elementary schools here in Waterloo area. But they, due to the pandemic, switched to a completely virtual format. So my partner had created a Facebook group that was a private Facebook group just for the families who had signed up to participate in this program, so they could still get continued learning, and that collaboration between community partners would still be there. So I worked to create some social media, basically a social media campaign for our Kids in the Kitchen program. And you can see here on the slide, there's 6 different images. There's 1 per lesson. We did the shortened 5 lessons again, and then one, the top left there is our intro slide. So when they introduce the Kids in the Kitchen virtual social media series to their families, that's the image that goes with it, because data tells us that people look at images more on social media, and they will stop to look at that versus just reading text. And then I went ahead and I pre-made 26 total social media posts that I sent my partner to document, that was laid out by each lesson. And then she could pick 5 posts, from each lesson to post on her social media that she saw best fit her families, because she knows her families more than I do, and she has those interactions with those families. So it includes all those interactive activities, the hands-on activities, there's some virtual games, there's some videos. So whatever she felt was the best option to connect with her families, she would post that per lesson. All of this connected back to the bingo card again, very intentional about that. And then we really utilized our partner to connect with this and provide them with that resource. One of the things in all of this pandemic planning is our partners were also very overwhelmed with programming. So Demi and Cassie had the option to present virtually. I did not here in Waterloo. Schools were not open to partners coming in during the beginning of the school year due to all the new policy changes. They wanted to give their students and teachers time to adjust. So my programming is a lot more based on virtual ways to do things where I'm not necessarily in person through a screen and things like that. And then on the next slide, I talk a little bit about successes and challenges. We're providing more resources to families, new presence and new audience. Facebook is completely new realm for us. It was kind of a nice setup with, I still can collect information about the families she's serving and how many families and things like that. I can direct it at a target audience in this particular partner connection. Also potential future use on our social media pages, and also consistent branding throughout. Challenges, always technology seems to be a big one. Technology access is on there. There's no food or recipe, no hands-on activities that we are directly doing as educators with our youth, and there's no direct connections formed through this process. Also, data collection looks a little different, and we're not getting that directly from the youth with the impact data of what they have learned.